So this week, the Supreme Court heard a case that centers around how cities should deal with the homelessness crisis. And obviously, big issue affecting large cities everywhere in America. One of the biggest revelations that I saw from that oral argument, it may have come from a Christian ministry that basically insisted the homeless need to be punished or converted. And I'll get into why that's so disturbing, besides the obvious, in a second. Let me give you a little background on this story in case you didn't follow it. The case involved the city of Grants Pass, Oregon, where apparently there are more homeless people than available beds in shelters, which raises the question of where are they going to go? So city leaders have chosen to address the problem not by building affordable housing or building more shelters, but rather by fining people on the streets like hundreds of dollars for using blankets, pillows, or cardboard boxes. If they catch you outside using like a little tent or your makeshift bed in public property, they're going to give you a fine because clearly you have the money to pay it. And when homeless people get multiple fines, then they can ban you from the city, which is basically them saying, we can't deal with this crisis, so we're going to shove you to the next city over and let them deal with you. It's a very Greg Abbott way of thinking. Like, oh, refugees coming into our states, let's bus them to Chicago. That'll solve everything. Um, and the thing is, if those homeless people remain in the city, even after the fines, then they can be criminally prosecuted. So, like, the question comes up, what the hell do you want them to do at this point? Okay. Now, a previous legal case that the Supreme Court decided years ago, it already said those kind of penalties where you criminalize homelessness, they said you can't do that. That's unconstitutional. It's cruel and unusual punishment that violates one of the amendments, right? So, with the help of an attorney, a handful of homeless people in Grants Pass, Oregon, they filed a lawsuit against the city saying the city's ordinances were illegal. And this is the case that went all the way up to the Supreme Court. Basically, they said the local laws are punishing us for basically existing, and that's illegal. Plus, they added, we're not choosing to live on the streets. There really are no other options available for us. And why are you criminalizing our existence? Because you can't do that. And they won this case in all the lower courts. And then the city kept appealing and appealing, just hoping it'll get in the hands of Sam Alito. And that's what happened this week. It got to Sam Alito. It got to the Supreme Court, and this is the case in front of them. So the question is, should the city of Grants Pass be allowed to criminalize homelessness? I mean, it would be a disaster and another layer of cruelty if the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the city. Obviously, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to get into the legal arguments here. But what I do want to point you to are a couple of things that are really important about this case. The first thing is the people who filed the lawsuit, they were not kidding when they said there were a lack of options in the city. In fact, when this was in front of the appellate court like a while back, I want to show you what they said here because they were summarizing this case. And look at what this said. There's 4 places where homeless people are allowed to go in Grants Pass. And we'll get to Gospel Rescue Mission in a moment. But look at the other 3. In addition to the Gospel Rescue Mission, the city, number 1, the city itself operates a sobering center where law enforcement could transport intoxicated or impaired persons. So if you're drunk and they catch you, they can take you to a place. That facility has 12 locked rooms with toilets where you could sober up. The rooms did not have beds. That's option number 1. You can't even sleep there if you wanted to. And also it's for people who are like publicly drunk. Number 2, the city also provided financial support to the Hearts with a Mission Youth Shelter, an 18-bed facility where unaccompanied minors aged 10 to 17 could stay for 72 hours. So kids whose parents are like missing or something, kids can stay there for 3 days, longer if they have parental permission, and there's only 18 beds. So again, if you're a homeless person, that's not an option for you if you're an adult and you're homeless. Option number 3. Finally, on nights when the temperature was below 30 degrees or below 32 degrees with snow, the city operates a warming shelter capable of holding up to 40 individuals. No beds. So there you go. Like 40 people can be shoved into the warehouse, but there's nowhere for them to sleep. So 3 of the 4 options in the city are really not feasible. By the way, if it's not freezing outside, they can't even use option 3 because it's only a warming center. It was closed when it's not cold. So that leaves option number 4. Let me show you what option number 4 is. It's this place. Grants Pass Gospel Rescue Mission. This is the Christian mission that is the final that's the only option for everyone to go to. And here's the thing about this place. This is a Christian mission. I want to find you. Okay. There was an article in the Baffler about this place, and it had so many interesting details. I want to read through this. I know it's long, but let's talk about this. Once an individual is accepted into that shelter, that Christian run shelter, the only option, they must comply with all the house rules or sacred covenant, which hammer home the conditional nature of the charity on offer. So, important. In exchange for a bunk for 30 days, individuals are required to work without pay for 6 hours a day, 6 days a week. They have to work for the church, for the ministry, 6 hours a day, 6 days a week, no pay. Jobs include working for the mission's business ventures, cleaning streets downtown, for which the mission, but not you, are compensated. And during this 30-day period, residents can't even look for outside work. They can't even try to get back up on their feet because they're indentured servants to this Christian mission. And check this out. For Dolores Nevin, who once went to the mission with a torn rotator cuff and was turned away when she couldn't work, disabilities that prevent you from participating in daily mission life basically bar you from staying there. So if you can't work, if you can't do physical labor, this Christian mission is like, sorry, go back out on the street, where apparently the city doesn't allow you to stay. Wait, it gets worse. Residents must also attend a traditional chapel twice a day and go to a Christian church that follows the Nicene and Apostles' Creed. So basically, certain conservative Christian churches are fine, but if you're a Unitarian and you want to go to a Unitarian church, that doesn't count. We're kicking you out of here. You have to go to a good church at least once a week. Oh, wait, we're not done. If you smoke, you can't. You can't be here. Smokers are barred unless they agree to quit cold turkey and switch to nicotine patches. I don't smoke, but I am told that is not an easy thing to do. Another guy said this gives residents skin in the game, a way to make sure people are serious about leaving homelessness behind. Which again, if you're on any kind of drugs, including cigarettes, it's not like you're doing it for funsies. Sometimes you just can't quit even if you want to. Among other petty rules, no socializing between members of the opposite sex, except at approved mission events. For residents, all intimate relationships other than legal biblical marriage, regardless of gender, either on or off mission property, are strictly forbidden. So basically, there's a rule that says no sex, even if you're married, for the 30 days you are here. That is the only feasible option for homeless people living in Grants Pass. So not only is there only option of friggin' church prison that operates like a cult, it's also saying you gotta believe in the Jesus that we believe in. Otherwise, you also can't stay here, because it's more important to them that you believe in their God than they help you. You know what I mean? If you don't want to believe what they believe, they would rather see you out on the street than actually help you, because that's what Jesus taught them to do. By the way, this is not related, but this is another headline I found about Gospel Rescue Mission. Oh, look, they asked disabled women to leave. Just get out. That's the whole headline. That's the sort of place we are talking about here. So this is why this case is so disturbing. Grants Pass, the city of Grants Pass, is saying, you have options. You can go to the Christian shelter if you need a place to stay. And everyone's looking at the Christian shelter and thinking that's not really an option for any decent person. Like, if you want that for yourself, fine, but that cannot be the only viable option there. So, again, like I said, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to get into the legal specifics. What I will say is that if you look at cases like this anytime, one of the things you notice, this is from SCOTUS blog, when you look at a case in front of the Supreme Court, it shows you the history of the case, like when they asked the Supreme Court to take it up, when they did, all that. And then when you get into look at these yellow things, what these yellow highlighted items are basically other groups of people saying, listen, I have no involvement in this case, but I do have an opinion about how you should rule on it. So, hey, Supreme Court, I'm writing something called an amicus brief so you can read it and hear my arguments because I have a vested interest in how you rule on this case. And the reason I say that's interesting is because you have all these third parties saying, we want you to rule this way. And then you can read what their arguments are. And, the Supreme Court justices are looking at these, their clerks are looking at these. So you have a bunch of them I think this is in favor of the city. And then you have other ones in green here in favor of the homeless people. And it's always very interesting to see who's writing amicus briefs for which side. Because sometimes it'll be like every Republican in the Senate is on the side of banning abortion pills. And who's on the side of women? Like 47 progressive churches. It's all very interesting. But the reason I bring that up, there was a article in Religion News Service that talked about what some of these briefs said. And I wanted to show you one of these, if I could find it here. All right, I'll find it. Here we go. One of the guys who wrote an amicus brief, this is what he wrote. If I can find, there we go. Criminalizing, exploiting, and hurting poor and unhoused people is an affront to God and to Christianity itself and to other religious traditions themselves. That's a guy who works for a Christian group. Their organization wrote an amicus brief saying, by hurting the homeless, you're actually going against our Christian beliefs. They also said, I'm just going to quote here, that punishing poor and homeless people for the effects of their poverty and homelessness, it fails to honor the holy nature of creation. Here it is. You could see this right here. This is from an amicus brief from this organization. This is just one of many religious organizations that's telling the Supreme Court how to rule on this. The universal bedrock beliefs of faith traditions have said for centuries that punishing the poor fails to honor creation and fails society as a whole. Here's another one. This is from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. They are like notoriously anti-gay, anti-trans, anti-abortion. But here's what the USCCB said about this case. The Catholic Church, consistent with Western tradition, has long taught that the homeless are to be helped, not punished. It has also long taught that punishments must be proportional to the crimes for which they are imposed. Underlying both teachings is a simple principle: respect for human dignity. The city's punitive laws cannot be squared with this principle. So even the Catholic bishops are saying we got to have respect for human dignity, unless you're a woman, in which case they absolutely do not care. So I bring that up to say, even conservative and progressive religious organizations are telling the Supreme Court, you got to rule on the side of the homeless people here, because it is, we literally have a religious stake to help the homeless. You got to help them. It violates our religion for you to say that they should be punished for what they're dealing with, right? Who's on the other side? Who could possibly argue that, no, of course you got to kick the homeless out? Well, guess who just did that? It would be Gospel Rescue Mission. Let me show you this right here. This is the amicus brief filed. I'm going to scroll down here. Where is it? Grants Pass Gospel Rescue Mission. Where did it go? Here it is. This is their brief. And look at their conclusion right here. Municipal public safety laws are a crucial tool in helping the homeless take advantage of available safe shelter resources. Taking away the city's power to enforce those laws, as the lower court has done here, does not benefit the homeless, as that court evidently hoped. Instead, it has only hindered the efforts of those in Grants Pass who devote each day to bettering the lives of those facing homelessness, which is a weird way of saying we need you to punish the homeless and threaten them with fines and banishing them from the city. Because if you don't do that, they won't come to us. And if they don't come to us, how are we going to get paid? How are we going to do our job? That is literally their argument here. They also said in that brief that the inability to punish the homeless, which is what the earlier decision said, has significantly decreased the number of people who access the mission services, as if that's a bad thing. They are literally calling for the city to fine and jail the homeless in the hopes that they become the only alternative for anyone seeking to avoid punishment. Because when you think you are the antidote, you start to root for poison. And that's what this Christian ministry is doing here. It is really interesting that the word God never appears in that amicus brief, which is not just unusual for a Christian ministry. It is very weird for anyone making an argument to this arch-conservative Supreme Court. Like, their argument is not a religious one, because how could it be? The ministry basically says we have beds available, but for some reason, a lot of them are going unused. And they're saying that's because the city can't punish these people. And it never occurs to them, maybe no one wants to stay at your shitty shelter because your rules suck and you're forcing your religion on all the people who go there. They seem blissfully aware of how off-putting their services are, that homeless people are like, what are my options? My options are living on the street or going to your like cult house where I can't have sex or a cigarette for a month. I'm going to go with living on the street. That's how awful these people are. And writing for Religion News Service, Kevin Nye, who wrote that article about what religious groups were saying in the Supreme Court case, this is interesting what he wrote, because even though if their argument is well intentioned, Gospel Rescue Mission's plea raises serious legal and theological questions. For example, if the rescue mission, the only option in town, can shelter just 138 people, how can the government criminalize all 1,200 people experiencing homelessness in the city? Like, logistically, that doesn't make sense. Do Christian organizations have a theological mandate or even a justification for forcing religious programming in exchange for shelter and care? Can the government compel homeless people to stay at a shelter that has strict religious requirements without infringing further on their constitutional rights? Those are all excellent questions that don't really have good answers, especially if the Supreme Court sides with the Christian ministry in the city on this one, because it's just going to raise other problems. Like, the Christian shelter cannot be the only option. The long-term solutions for homelessness, as anyone who has studied the topic will tell you, they involve mental health care, addiction specialists, affordable housing, maybe a guaranteed income, secular, not atheist, but secular shelters. What you can't do is just punish them more and make it harder for them to get back up on their feet. But right now, the city of Grants Pass is not giving them secular, safe places to stay. Instead, Grants Pass is arguing that we have enough options in the city, and the only alternative is to further punish people who are already struggling. Makes no sense. It's completely insane logic. And the one Christian ministry directly involved in the case is going all in on the side of let's do more cruelty. I guess if there's any silver lining here, it's that according to legal pundits who watched this case, the oral arguments this week, they said it did not appear to be a slam dunk for the city of Grants Pass. But that said, it doesn't really matter, does it? Because this Supreme Court is absolutely going to side with the city and against the homeless people. It is what they do. It's why they were put on the court. They're religious conservatives for a reason. The question is, how broad or narrow will their decision be? We will see. For once, though, and I don't say this very often, it would be really nice if the Supreme Court justices would listen to all the religious groups, except for one, talking to them and saying, don't criminalize homelessness because you're just going to make a bad situation even worse. Going to pause there for a bit. Let's see if there are other questions here. Our delightful Tory government are considering laws like this in the UK. Oh, that's not surprising in the least. Listen, I don't know when they're going to call for the next election. I know it's got to be sometime soon, but and I know the polls are very much on the side of Labour, but like you need to vote out all those Tories. I know Keir Starmer isn't exactly like AOC or anything. He's not an inspirational figure necessarily, but like get rid of that government. What are you people doing there? Good luck to you. What else we got? How is this legal? It involves Jesus. Therefore, that does the trick. The city said it's fine. I mean, it shouldn't be legal, but it sadly it is. What if you already have a job? Not all homeless people are unemployed. Thank you for pointing that out. I'll be honest, I don't know the answer because if you're living at that Christian shelter, I think you are mandated to work for them for the, what was it, like 36 hours a week that they were forcing you to work. And I don't think you're allowed to focus on anything else except what you're doing at the ministry. But I'll be honest, I don't have a definitive answer on that. Just based on what I've read, I don't think they would allow you to keep that other job. Which again, you would think that sounds counterintuitive because don't you want them to work and earn some money and then maybe get a house that's affordable? But that doesn't seem to be the case. Nothing wrong with slavery, according to their Bible. No, we're going to talk about that one a little later in a story or two. But yeah, there's a lot of, you could spin the Bible any way you want it to defend whatever horrible thing you want. And that's what they're doing here. Thanks, Lauren. Does the mission have an affiliation? Thanks, Den, for that question. You know what? I don't think I looked it. No, I lied. I did look it up, but it wasn't like a traditional affiliation. I would have to go back. If I can go to their about page, what did they say? They were very you have to search. Here it is. Here's the line I was looking at. We are where oh my god, where did it go? Oh, our executive director meets with the local Church of the Valley pastors. Like it's one of those vague answers that doesn't really tell you anything. I think it's just non-denominational Christian. I don't know that they're affiliated with any particular denomination, but it's disturbing.